And we're back in the car like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Friday evening here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. So I'm really struggling because there is a particular movie that I want to talk about. I want to talk about Spike Jonze's 2002 adaptation of Charlie Kaufman's screenplay. Well, it's a long, complicated story, but I want to talk about the movie called Adaptation, which was nominated for 4 Oscars, winning 1. Chris Cooper, who I've talked about on the channel, for Best Supporting Actor. But problem I'm having here is that I have always believed that Adaptation was not as good as its reputation. My perception is the film falls apart in the third act. Maybe even the whole second half is not good. But the other idea is that this is regarded by many as a legitimately great film, but I just don't like it. And in this instance, maybe I'm the problem. You know, they say, well, maybe he's the problem, maybe she's the problem, maybe I'm the problem, but I am still going to categorize Adaptation with the series of most overhyped movies, despite its 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. And as I said, Nicolas Cage nominated for Best Actor, Meryl Streep nominated for Best Supporting Actress, and Chris Cooper winning the Best Supporting Actor Oscar. And I think the real Charlie Kaufman was nominated for his screenplay and didn't win. But the thing with Adaptation is it gets points for being inventive and super creative. And it's something that I said about the previous collaboration between director Spike Jonze and screenwriter Charlie Kaufman, which was the 1999 film, more critically acclaimed and bigger box office. Adaptation more or less bombed at the box office. It didn't even gross, it made about 1.5 times its production cost. It was not a hit. But the previous film they did was Being John Malkovich. Another movie that I don't like, but I can admit is brilliant, ingenious, and like nothing I've ever seen. So, Adaptation was not the movie that we saw. The film that was made is not what was originally intended. And if that sounds weird, well, I will clarify. So an author by the name of Susan Orlean, that's the character that Meryl Streep plays in this film. Susan Orlean wrote a book in the 1990s. I don't remember what year it came out, but she wrote a book called The Orchid Thief about a guy named John LaRoche. That's the Chris Cooper character in the world of this film. But it's about a guy who I think he's deep in the Florida Everglades. I could be wrong about that, but it's in an area of Florida. The particular area where this guy LaRoche went there's not a lot of people around, let's put it that way. And he basically he stole a rare orchid, hence the title of the book, The Orchid Thief. So in the real world, not the world of the movie Adaptation, in the real world of Hollywood, in the real world of the brilliant screenwriter Charlie Kaufman. See, I could sit here and say that I didn't like Adaptation, and I didn't enjoy Being John Malkovich at all. But if somebody says, is this a brilliant writer? Yes. This is a Mozart. I'm not even a Salieri. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is a Mozart. This is a Da Vinci level screenwriter. As a studio executive said when Being John Malkovich hit his desk and he read it, he said something like, this isn't for me, but this is probably a really creative screenplay in whatever world this writer is from. Like, that's how different Charlie Kaufman, that's how different his work has been and has come across. So Charlie Kaufman was hired to do the adaptation of Susan Orlean's novel. And this is the thing in Hollywood. We know this, even if we're not deep into the ins and outs of how the big studio machinery works as far as making movies, and sometimes the process of translating a big literary property to the screen. And not that long ago, a couple of weeks ago, I talked about the film Presumed Innocent, which was the Alan J. Pakula, Harrison Ford in a very kind of atypical role for that era Harrison Ford, as more or less a schmuck who may or may not have bumped off his mistress. That was a huge literary property, but that was a huge literary property that people who read it knew that the pieces were in place for a big, exciting, suspense thriller kind of a movie. Charlie Kaufman took the job of trying to adapt Susan Orlean's book, The Orchid Thief. And as someone who at the time was, at least in theory, a young writer on the outer edges of the business, at the time that Charlie Kaufman had gotten this gig, was probably right around 2000. I had a number of projects that were in the pipeline. Again, in theory, they didn't end up getting made, but I had the Y.A. Tittle project that was moving seemingly in the right direction. I had the Brooklyn Dodgers screenplay, seemed to be, Elijah Wood was circling it, and there was another actress, I can't remember her name, who was, and then there was an idea that Stanley Tucci may get involved, but I was more plugged into the nuts and bolts of the business, is what I'm saying, than I am now. And I remember reading about Charlie Kaufman getting this gig, and then a couple of months later, there were these strange stories coming out of Hollywood about Charlie Kaufman and about his attempt to adapt The Orchid Thief. And the buzz was, it can't be done. This can't be done. And Charlie Kaufman, they were saying that he appeared to be going through writer's block, but he wasn't going through writer's block. There was not enough story in that book. There was enough story for a book, for a nonfiction book, but there was not nearly enough story for a Hollywood film. You might say there wasn't enough story for an independent film. So the real Charlie Kaufman probably wrote about 35 or so pages of screenplay. I don't even know if he got that far. And he gave up. He gave up, but he was being paid a lot of money, so you can't just punt. Now, whether or not you're a young writer on the way up, whether you're someone who's already made it, when you agree to take a gig, a job, a big job, you've got to you got to turn in something. You have to do something. Occasionally writers will quit, but usually it's on the order of David Mamet getting a guaranteed $5 million and having a bunch of low-level studio executives tell him what's wrong with his script, and Mamet going like this. That's not the same thing. So Charlie Kaufman apparently went to, and there's a scene in this movie with the Tilda Swinton character. I think she's supposed to represent what I'm saying. The real Charlie Kaufman went to the people who were funding him, and the idea was to make this movie. And I don't know what they saw in her book that made them think this could be a movie at the studio level or at any level, but what are you going to do? You take the job, you do the best you can. So apparently at some point Charlie Kaufman went to the executives and said, I can't do this. This is not doable. I don't know that he said, would you like your money back? But there was some back and forth, and he said, I have an idea of what I could do, and I would like to run that by you, but I'm telling you, this can't be a 110-page screenplay. There's no way. He could have made up 80% of the book, and then it wouldn't have been an adaptation. So it's all, you're getting into really negative territory. So what Charlie Kaufman proposed, he said, how about I make this, I don't know if he said make this really meta, but how about if I write a screenplay about a character named Charlie Kaufman finding himself unable to adapt The Orchid Thief, and then we just go from there. Then it will give me an opportunity to not follow the narrative of the book, which is no narrative. It's not a movie, and here I am trying to turn it into a movie, or words to that effect. So that's where Adaptation came from. It's about Charlie Kaufman's failed adaptation, his failed attempt to adapt Susan Orlean's book, The Orchid Thief. And what Kaufman did was create a second character. So yes, he's playing a version, Nicolas Cage that is playing a version of Charlie Kaufman. His name is Charlie Kaufman in the world of the film. And he is seemingly writer's blocked, but it's not writer's block so much as there isn't enough material, and he knows this, and he feels like this is going to be the end of my career. I can't produce. I'm getting paid all this money, and I can't produce what I'm being tasked with. It can't be done. So the brother, Donald, is also played by Nicolas Cage. And we're supposed to get, and if you want to, go into Freudian stuff, Charlie Kaufman and Donald Kaufman, I believe, are supposed to represent two sides of one person. Charlie Kaufman, his presentation is, despite his money and despite his fame, again, within normal parameters, that he was already a well-known screenwriter, he's completely helpless socially. And there's a character played by a terrific actress, Judy Greer, and she's a real character on social media. I follow her on Instagram. She seems like, for what it's worth, a really nice person. She doesn't come across like a movie star. But the character that she plays in this film, it's a fantastic, it's not a big performance, but she is marvelous. She plays, I believe, a waitress who Charlie Kaufman has a crush on. And for someone like me, and I'm going to give you a little more information about myself, in my late 20s, I had not had sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. Let me put it that way. I had zero social life. I just had no social life. I was completely locked up like this guy in social settings. I couldn't help but stare at the ground, speak too quickly, social anxiety disorder. That's what Charlie Kaufman is dealing with. On top of not being able to adapt a book that can't be adapted, he is lusting after this woman. And honestly, the way that Charlie Kaufman is presented, I love how Nicolas Cage did this, because, you know, Nicolas Cage, certainly of this era, was doing really interesting work. Matchstick Men with Ridley Scott was his next one. He plays an even bigger basket case, but someone who was at least functional professionally for most of the film. He did The Weatherman, Lord of War, and obviously National Treasure. Cage was just doing so much great work in the 90s and the kind of early aughts. But the way that his character and the way that Charlie Kaufman wrote Charlie Kaufman, I give him a lot of credit there too. And this is not a question of being brilliant. This is a question of presumably laying yourself out naked in front of people who would see this movie, because it's the same name, and we say, well, this is probably what this guy is really like. So despite looking like Nicolas Cage, very fit, very attractive, he is a basket case, and he cannot get out of his own way. And as somebody who struggled with anxiety and struggled with making real connections with other people, this character spoke to me. And I like the way the twin brother Donald is played almost like how we would imagine the real Nicolas Cage. High energy, a very excitable personality. You know, Nicolas Cage with all of the wild eyes in movies like Vampire's Kiss, Wild at Heart. That's how we imagine Nicolas Cage, is the character of Donald Kaufman, the twin brother. And Donald Kaufman, he comes up with an idea for a screenplay, for a serial killer story, which is so absurd, Hollywood ended up almost making it. I'm not going to tell you which movie they ended up doing, but it's very close to what the real Charlie Kaufman, just joking around more or less about this brother character of Donald, comes up with this idiotic idea for a suspense thriller. So there is one incredible scene in this film. Now bear in mind, I really liked the first half of this movie. I thought it was fantastic. And I was really geared up and geeked up because most of the critical reviews I saw were praising the film to the skies. Tremendous performance by Nicolas Cage, which is true. He is really good in the roles of both Charlie and Donald. We see the delineation. Even though they're twins, they could not be any more different. It's really beautiful work from him. And Meryl's terrific. And I was a Chris Cooper fan. I didn't really like his performance in American Beauty as, you know, Colonel Fitz. That movie just doesn't work for me. That's in my overhyped movie. It's a good film, but I didn't see 3 out of 4 stars. It's not the masterpiece to me that so many people of the day that they saw. I also loved Cooper's performance in October Sky with a very young Jake Gyllenhaal. That's a terrific film and just a great performance by him as the father. And Lone Star, his kind of star-making role in John Sayles. I mean, it might be the best movie next to 8 Men Out John Sayles ever made. Chris Cooper plays the lead in that film and is just fantastic. But in Adaptation, there is this moment where Nicolas Cage, as Charlie Kaufman, he knows he's got to do some work. He's got to do some work. Even though he keeps telling himself the obvious, this can't be a movie, I'm fucked. But he says to himself, I got to get some work done. I got to at least write a page. So he gets in front of his computer, you know, early 2000s era computer. He gets in front of it. He's getting ready to start writing. I don't know what he's going to write. I don't know that he knows, but he wants to do something. He wants to get something down because he's driving himself insane. He's got like hundreds of pages of notes and none of this is even cinematic. He's fucked. So I got to write a page. Got to write a page. Somehow I need to write a page. I got so many different ideas. None of them are any good, but I have to write a page. So he starts to, puts his fingers, keyboard, and then he goes, a cup of coffee and a bran muffin would probably help me get something done. I'm really in the mood for a cup of coffee and a bran muffin. And we hear his interior monologue. He goes, no, write a page and then bring the coffee and the bran muffin over here and then do a little more work. Do it that way. So he's going to talk himself into it, and the reward, and I don't recommend any writers do this, the reward for writing a page is he gets to have coffee and a bran muffin. Then he says, what if the coffee and the bran muffin is what I need to write the page? He gets up, he gets himself coffee and a bran muffin, he comes back and he enjoys his coffee and he enjoys his bran muffin, but he doesn't write anything. He writes nothing. And unfortunately, we can identify with that too. That's not so far-fetched. It's funny, and the way that Cage again plays the scene is beautiful. The acting, the voiceover, it's all really well edited by Spike Jonze. The sound mix is terrific. That's my favorite scene in the film. Probably because there was no way to adapt The Orchid Thief. Charlie Kaufman did not have anything past like halfway through. And to me, the movie goes off the cliff. I'm sorry I had to spoil this. The moment that Meryl Streep's Susan Orlean snorts a line of cocaine. At least I think that's what she does. It jumped the shark to me and went totally off the rails. I wanted more scenes of the LaRoche character, the Chris Cooper character. I feel like his role should have actually been even bigger than it was in the movie. But it just doesn't work. The second half of the film, and I remember a couple of film buffs, if you will, at Bev's gym talking about this film, and they had seen it. They were higher on this movie than me. My reaction here for a supposed cineast is not good. Like, I'm not supposed to be so down on this movie. But after seeing it, the way I described it, the first half of the movie, I thought this was 4 stars. But they didn't stick the landing, which was my complaint with The Usual Suspects. I thought the last 5 minutes of The Usual Suspects, or last 10 minutes, was catastrophically bad, and I give that film 2.5 stars after loving the first 90-something% of it. This movie, I just hate almost everything that happens in the second half of the film. It didn't work. And another movie with Nicolas Cage where it's a similar, not really a similar concept, but a similar idea of a person playing more or less themselves, is the one that he did with Pedro Pascal, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Genius, or whatever, about where Nicolas Cage is basically playing a very thinly veiled version of himself. And there's a lot of stuff in that movie where we're not sure, like a Tropic Thunder thing, is this really a movie being shot, or are they really getting shot at? Everything that happened in Adaptation in the last at least half hour, 40 minutes, it just turned me off. And so it went from a movie that I thought this is on its way to being a 4-star movie, the movie that a lot of critics saw. I mean, 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, that's a fantastic score. But for reference, Being John Malkovich got 94%. That was even more highly critically praised. And if I'm asked which film do I think is better, like, Being John Malkovich is brilliant from start to finish. I just didn't enjoy the movie. It's a similar, you may have seen or heard my episode on the movie Sinners. Sinners to me was a 9 out of 10, but I hate that movie. But I can't give it less than 9 because it is fucking brilliant. It is a fantastically orchestrated story, well acted, the music, all of that. I just hated the movie. It just pissed me off the whole way. I was mad. Didn't like it. But I'm not going to give it a bad rating just because it wasn't to my taste, because I can appreciate great art, even if it doesn't work for me, personally. At least I like to think I'm enlightened enough to do that. So right now, Adaptation is streaming on Paramount Plus, and Paramount Plus has been in the news a lot lately because of the merger, and I'm not sure if merger is the right word, but where the UFC, the Paramount Plus is going to begin carrying more programming, and what's going to happen with pay-per-view. I mean, there's a version of this where Paramount Plus jacks up their rates by like $20 a month, but any and all pay-per-view events are included, and there'll be tiers. They are going to make a fucking mint over that. But right now, if you get Paramount Plus, Adaptation is streaming. It is a film that I recommend in the same way that I tell people watch Sinners. Well, more so, if I'm giving it a 9 out of 10, I'm telling you it's good. But I would never tell anybody to not watch The Usual Suspects, because I am in that one in the way minority. Most people think that film sticks the landing and it's a 3.5 or 4-star movie. And most people that I have spoken to who are big movie fans, they like Adaptation more than me. They wouldn't give it 2.5 stars. But I'm giving it 2.5 and a kind of the old Roger Ebert, Gene Siskel marginal thumbs up. I recommend the performances, but not the movie. One of my favorite moments ever in Siskel and Ebert, they reviewed a film with the late, great Sir Richard Harris. And was Marissa Tomei in that movie? I don't remember. But the film is called Wrestling Ernest Hemingway. And Sir Richard Harris plays this. It's not a very good movie, I can admit that. But Roger Ebert liked what Harris did enough to give it a thumbs up. He said it's not great, but you see what they're going for. It's certainly worth seeing, in my opinion. And Gene Siskel was a little bit more lukewarm even than Roger, and he says, I recommend the performances, but not the movie. Siskel gave it a thumbs down. He and Ebert agreed on everything. The difference was that Ebert, with all of his qualifications and reservations, gave the film a thumbs up, and Siskel gave it a thumbs down. So again, top tier Roger Ebert moment. Siskel says, I recommend the performances, but not the movie. Thumbs down for me. Roger says, Gene, how are they going to see the performances if you don't recommend the movie? I mean, that had me howling. He's not wrong, and Siskel even laughed, but he didn't end up changing it to, okay, I'll give it a lukewarm thumbs up. He still gave it a thumbs down. I recommend the performances, but not the movie. Yeah, bro, how are we going to see the movie if we take your word for it and don't go because you give it a thumbs down? Great stuff. Boy, I love those guys. They haven't been together and didn't work, I think, since the end of 1998. Gene's health went downhill. But that show, it's hard to explain to younger people, especially if you're under 40. You probably never saw them on TV. You may have seen Roger Ebert 15, 20 years ago with like a Richard Roper or somebody, one of his other partners. Even Harry Knowles sat in a few times. But they were so good at reviewing movies. They were so good. And Roger Ebert did give Adaptation. I'm almost sure he gave it a thumbs up. And he was still healthy at that point. I met Ebert in 2003. He spoke at Rockefeller University. He was promoting one of his books. I hated this movie. Man, that guy was something else. But, you know, Adaptation is an entertaining film, but I just found it very, very frustrating. And that's why I have to put it in the category of most overhyped movies, because most films that are 90% or higher, I really like. And so I've given you 3 in this episode, in Being John Malkovich and Adaptation, and Sinners, which is at 96% the last time I looked, where I can admit they're brilliant. More so Sinners and Being John Malkovich. I just think Adaptation, I think the story goes off the rails in the second half. And, you know, it kind of lets Nicolas Cage down, and to some extent, it leaves Meryl Streep lost at sea. I didn't buy any of the nonsense. Again, I'm not spoiling it, but any of the nonsense that her character gets into in the second half. I just thought it was all poor. Like it just didn't work. Poor is the wrong word. That it just didn't work. But if I'm asked, did Charlie Kaufman make the best of an untenable situation? Absolutely. At least he turned something in, and they were able to make a movie that a lot of people love. Whereas if he had simply, in a meeting we see in the film with the Tilda Swinton character, if he had simply said, I can't do this, I give up, here's your money back, he probably would have given him 80% back. I mean, I don't even know how that works. I wish that I had been in a situation like that, but I wasn't. But he tried to make lemonade out of lemons. And many people think he succeeded brilliantly. And, you know, the performances are fantastic. You can't take anything away. Meryl gives everything she's got. And as I say, the turns to her character are like crazy. And Cooper deservedly won. He deservedly won the supporting actor Oscar. And Cage was nominated. That was the year where he was standing next to Jack, and it's a great Oscars moment. You know, I love to see this kind of stuff. Nicolas Cage was next to Jack Nicholson, and when they announced Best Actor, that was the year with Adrien Brody winning for The Pianist. I don't think anyone in attendance thought that Adrien Brody was going to win that year, and everybody has pride in that business. Everybody wants to win. I mean, Jack was so overjoyed when he won for As Good as It Gets, which was from films released in 97. I talked about the film he was nominated for films released in 2002, About Schmidt. And that is by far Jack's most undersold, brilliant masterclass in film acting performance. Even with the Best Actor nomination, that's a film that's still under-repped as far as his career, and just showing how great that guy was. Like, he's not just, big personality, you can't handle the truth, you want me on that wall. Jack Nicholson had it in him to give nuanced, real-life, human performances. It didn't always have to be about the showmanship and the theatricality. But, so, Jack was one of the people, they didn't think that Nicolas Cage was going to win, but a lot of thought that Jack was going to win for About Schmidt, which is just a phenomenal film. It is just an incredible movie, and Jack's performance is incredible. But when Adrien Brody was announced, the way that both Nicolas Cage, who was probably disappointed, even though he had won his Oscar, 7-8 years earlier, the way that Nicolas Cage and Jack stood up and gave Adrien Brody the standing ovation. I hate to be so shallow, but that's why I go to the movies. That's why I still love the movies, and why I'm not down on Hollywood, as so many people are, Hollywood sucks, for moments like that, for moments of pure joy and magic. In a similar vein, in 2024, at the 2023 Oscars, when Ki Hai Kwan and Harrison Ford embrace on stage. That's why we love the movies. How many years, almost 40 years after Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, here are these two guys on stage at the Oscars. That's why we go to the movies. So, as I say, Adaptation is streaming free on Paramount Plus, and absolutely worth seeing. Most people appreciate this film more than I do, and maybe the kind of crazy or wacky twists in the second half, maybe you'll see it. You're like, this fucking guy on his podcast, I don't know what movie he watched. The movie got better as it went along, and this loser says it got worse. Fuck him. Hey, it's all good, right? This is the judgment-free zone. You guys can judge me all you want, but I make no judgment. I'm simply telling it as I see it, right, wrong, or indifferent. So, Adaptation from 2002, Oscar winner for Chris Cooper, Best Supporting Actor, and nominated for 3 other Oscars, one for Charlie Kaufman for his admittedly ingenious way of getting out of a pickle that he could not escape, nominated for Best Actor, Nicolas Cage, and Best Supporting Actress for Meryl Streep, the newest entry in our continuing series of overhyped movies. Adaptation was, of course, directed by Spike Jonze. This has been episode 593 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your Friday evening here with me in New York. And if you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.